back to Crafty Magic Arts. Today is number 3 out of 8 of our Disney princesses, and I wonder who we're going to be working on next. If you've been following along, you know we're going in chronological order, and the next is Aurora, or Sleeping Beauty, or Briar Rose, whatever you want to call her. Prior to this, we've worked on Snow White and Cinderella. If you wish to follow along, I welcome you to go watch those videos prior after you're done this one. So, let's get a move on to Aurora, Sleeping Beauty, Briar Rose. I'll just call her Aurora for this video. Alright, and here's Aurora. As you can see, her pink dress is not even closely related to the color that's in the movie or even in the marketing. There's a ton of artifacts that needs to be clipped off. The crown comes off really easily. I did not pull that off. It just came like that, and you can see that it's broken, so it wasn't even connected properly. I got some smudges on the face, and her eyes actually are probably some of the nicest eyes, although she's still got red eyebrows. That's weird. All right, here we're gonna look back at Aurora, but she's now on my work desk, and I am taking her apart and then working on those little artifacts I mentioned earlier. These are pretty egregious and everywhere. I do clean up a number of them now, but I actually have to come back later and address them a little bit more thoroughly throughout the project because I keep finding more. Yeah, they were bad. Also on her dress, she's got a little bit of flashing here, and I need to just make sure I clean that up. As you can see here, the underside of the dress is actually not connected. This is something I will need to deal with, as well as how the hands connect to the dress. So yeah, that's coming, but first we're gonna work on the underside of the dress. This does need to come out so I can make it work. So after much work, I do manage to get it out, cleaned up, and now I'm putting it right back in exactly where it was if I can figure out the alignment. It takes a little bit of energy there. But here you can see I'm pressing it in and all the pieces are mostly connected, so I don't have that gross giant gap. But that one corner that I showed earlier is still a bit of a turd, so I add a lot more glue and kind of press it in with my fingers. This is not perfect, and I will need to use clay to make it work better. But before we can do that, we're going to work on that hand and get it actually attached to the dress. It actually look like it's holding it, not that the dress is just magically floating up in that direction. So she's holding onto it. Again, play needs to happen, so here I am with my gloves. Bit of a fun fact, I like to reuse my gloves, and sometimes I pull them off backwards and then put them on backwards, and it just feels wrong. But there I go, I fixed it, and now I'm on to DOS clay. This clay actually doesn't require you to use gloves, but oh my gosh, it leaves this really gnarly feeling on my fingers that I absolutely hate, so I do wear gloves. This is a choice, not a must. Here you can see that I have filled in all the gaps. I want to make sure it's pretty seamless. Then I go in with my tool to kind of help define the line and make sure that there is a clear definition between the upper dress and lower dress without it being like a gross gap, especially in the areas in which were much worse and more egregious than before. I probably could have just not removed the piece and done this anyways, but hey, I like to go above and beyond. Look at me. So it's looking pretty good. I do want to fix the ruffles. I've decided that the dress is just not flowy enough, so I actually add a lot of extra clay to hips of the dress, and I think it's just to make sure that it looks more flowy and more elegant. And I really like how this ends up looking because I do think the dress is actually a pretty decent sculpt. I needed more. I need more in my life. In between, you'll see my fingers getting a little damp there, and that's just water. You just need water to smooth out DOS clay, which is really nice, and that allows you to have a better transition from the plastic into the clay. It will be especially helpful when it's time to paint. You don't want those gross lines, and you don't want to have to spend a ton of time sanding, so that really helps. I do have to do the same thing with the hair, making sure that I want to make sure I get rid of some of these gross seams. In Cinderella, one of my biggest regrets is not removing one of the seams in her hair, and let's try not to make that a problem for this one. So here I am, we're adding the clay into all the different areas. I actually fill a bunch of gaps too. They don't need to have these gaps, so I figure I'll just make it a little bit more as a single piece instead of separate pieces. And in both Snow White and in Cinderella, I actually removed the hair from the head to paint and stuff. It was not possible with Sleeping Beauty, so I just didn't. Here I'm also making sure the crown is going to sit nicely, so I actually pop on a bunch of clay, and then I'm now sculpting like the hairline, which ends up working. Now you're seeing a little bit of a glimpse behind the scenes, and Snow White is sitting there just happily lazing about. I did all these princesses at the same time. I don't know why, but I did, so yay. All right, moving back onto Aurora, and let's actually put that all behind us. We do not know the magic behind the curtain. And I am removing her face. It's a little harder with the hair in the way, but I guess I make it work. Much like Cinderella and Snow White, I do have to scrape it off. I find even sanding to be challenging. Additionally, when I sand, I'm kind of sanding the whole face, and I run the risk of actually rubbing her nose off, and I don't want that to be a thing, so scraping it is. And also to get those lips. All right, now we're going on to painting. I am going to prep like I've done with all of them, and oh my gosh, that paint bottle is disgusting. Yep, what happens when you use old paint? Just gotta scrape it out and hope for the best. And here I'm adding all the different colors and mixing it together. I want the hair to be like a nice yellowy, golden color. She doesn't have, like, again, yellow hair like what the marketing has. Instead, it's more of a golden yellow. You can see here that even the color I have now is still too bright, so I have to darken it up, and I'm using tan to make that happen. Again, just using craft paints because I have them in a lot of variety of colors. So yeah, here it is getting a lot closer to what I want, and I think I'm feeling pretty good about it. So now we're going to add the paint. Again, not learning my lessons from previous experiences and going straight in with the color instead of first gessoing it. I love learning so much. Heat gun is definitely MVP again, absolutely the most valuable tool in my tool belt because I don't have to wait. I don't like waiting. I like things to go faster, and acrylic paint is quick dry, but not quick dry enough for me. As we peek behind the curtain again, just as a note, I am working with multiple blonde characters at once, so I need to make sure these colors are clearly marked. I will use the wrong one somewhere. But now we're moving on to the dress, and yeah, I am a blue dress girly. I never liked Sleeping Beauty in the pink dress. I know that's what they use for all the marketing because Cinderella wears blue. See my previous video to clearly outline why that's not a thing. But Sleeping Beauty wears blue for the majority of the time she's wearing this dress. That is her preferred color. She gets the dress from the fairies in blue, wears it, falls asleep in blue, or put in for her forever deep sleep in blue. He meets Prince again and woken up from the kiss in blue. And yeah, as you can see, I have clearly overthought this, but blue is the color Sleeping Beauty should be wearing. That is the end of my TED Talk. I mean, another option is on like this Barbie where I actually have like the split color. This is a beautiful Barbie. I would own this, but it's not what I'm trying to recreate here. What I'm trying to recreate is a moment in time where Sleeping Beauty is wearing her dress, and I think it should be red. So, continuing the TED Talk, even though I said it was over, yeah. In the meantime, I was working on the lighter colors. I did originally mix up a lighter color for the arms and for the belt, but for this top part, it does need to be this really, really light blue. It's how it looks in the references, so I'm going with it. One little anecdote about Sleeping Beauty. Did you know she was known as the Silent Princess? She actually only has 18 spoken lines of dialogue throughout the entire film. She does have her own song, but only 18 lines of spoken dialogue, and never speaks after the prince wakes her. She's completely silent. So she's officially known as the most quiet princess of all Disney princesses. Interesting. Now moving on to the face, we are going to use this pale skin tone that I have. It's not as transparent as the one I used on Snow White, so it'll only take a few coats, but I didn't gesso the face, so it's anybody's guess. And yeah, then we got to look at the skin on the body as well. We only have the chest that we got to do, also the back, and let's not forget those hands. We have to get both of them. Another fun fact about Sleeping Beauty is her film actually almost took a decade to make. And it was one of the most expensive movies to make at the time, which was about $6 million. That is a lot of money for back in 1950. Now you can see that I am painting the underside of Sleeping Beauty here, all the ruffles with my flat matte acrylics in white by Golden. I do always speak highly of these paints. They are my favorite. They're completely matte, and they're also absolutely the best coverage. So you don't have to worry about situations like this where I have to go over the edges and clean them up. This blue that's also flat matte acrylic has no problem covering up the white that I overshot with. So I absolutely love these paints, highly recommend them. Working on the crown now, I do have to sand off some of this paint that's already on it. I don't gesso it, but I do want to prep it. So I actually am using white here, as gold tends to go better, or anything shiny tends to go better on top of white. So I did plan in advance for this one. So I am using my white here as a good base to make sure that we're doing some good with this crown at a time. While the crown is drying, I might as well work on the dress. I'm using that super light blue that I used earlier on the lines of the dress. I want to make sure those are accentuated, and my watercolor pencils wouldn't have been able to go as light as I wanted, so I'm actually using the paint instead and using my finest brush to accomplish it. I do overshoot the lines a bit, so I do have to use my flat matte acrylic just to clean up the edges a bit to make them not as thick. They're really thick here, and I want to kind of let's calm them down a little. They're a little too thick, a little too excited there. So we're thinning those out a little bit and making sure they look nicer on the dress. One of the things that made Sleeping Beauty's budget blow out is mainly because Walt Disney really wanted this to be a moving illustration, and it became quite apparent how difficult the backgrounds were going to be. And they ended up working in this idea that they would look almost like moving tapestries. And even Earl actually worked to make these happen, and they were very time consuming. And Walt was incredibly picky and made sure that everything was perfect. Well, back to the project, I am working on the face, and I am using my black watercolor pencil, or really contemplating, like I am thinking things through before I make that first stroke. And oh, I did it. I am committing, and I'm working on the eyes. Here you can see that I'm drawing the outline. Much like my other pieces, I'm not looking for this to be the absolute, like the way I color it in. I'm actually just using it as a guideline. I don't know why I went in with like the darkest color. I think I started with black there, but I've moved on to brown. That was a bit smarter. I don't know why I didn't start with brown, but sure. Now I want to make sure that I am giving her eyelids. I am wanting to make sure that they're a little bit of a different color than her skin tone, so I'm using a bit of a darker tan to make that happen. I think this actually comes out really nice and it shapes the eyes really well. I'm referencing a specific photo right now, and I'll show you that in a bit. Here I am taking out white. Now I'm using craft white, and you're thinking, well, why aren't you using your flat matte acrylic? You just said you loved it. Well, it's because these are thinner, so I like to use the craft paint on the eyes just in case. I'm not too worried as much about coverage when I'm more worried about brush strokes. So now she's got eyebrows, and those are looking fire, I think. I don't know. Is that the right way of using that word? I don't know. I'm old. Now we are working on the lips, and I got this darker red, and again, I'm hesitating and I don't know why, but I do manage to make some nice lips there. She's got a little bit of an open smile, and then I am now working on the corner of her eyes, working on those eyelashes. So here is where I show you which example or which reference I'm using. I really love the shape of Sleeping Beauty's eyes. She tends to have a little bit more of like narrow, almond-shaped eyes, and I just think they're really beautiful, and I wanted to make sure I captured it here, challenging as that may be. Now we're coming to the real debate, Sleeping Beauty. What color are her eyes? And when she opens her eyes for the prince, they are very clearly blue. But the rest of the movie, when you do see her eyes, it's really hard to see what color they are, but they glint kind of a purple. Now, we don't know what happened in production and why her eyes show a blue when she opens her eyes, but her eyes do appear to be more purple, and there is agreement across the internet that her eyes are purple. In fact, in some references that Disney puts out, her eyes are clearly purple, but then in others, they're clearly blue. I'm going with purple because they're unique. I think it stands out to be really unique, so I'd much rather, have it that they actually appear as purple than blue. All right, during that debate, I was working on the eyes, and now I'm working on the eye shine, and that's too big, and oh my gosh, that is in the center of her eyeball. How did I do that? Okay, don't panic, we'll just grab some tissue, we will wipe it down, and it doesn't work, not even a little. Yep, I'm calm. Deep breaths, I'm okay, I can do this, okay. Now we're just going to repaint them. No big deal. Back to purple, and then we covered that up. Mistakes never happened. We wait for that to dry, and then we add our black again, hopefully as good as the first time. All right, it seems to be going pretty well, and now we're back to where we started. That's good, it's good. Take two. We're gonna try the eye shine. We're gonna delicately try with a brush this time. Tiny little dots, okay. So far so good. Let's move the camera up so we can follow along. We're actually adding two eye shines, one in the top, one on the bottom, and we did it. Yay. It looks good. Better even. All right. Back to the crown. We can do that. We can do anything. Well, almost anything. So as you can see here, I'm working on the crown and I'm making it very gold. See, I'm one that uses reference and I failed at this. I went with what I thought it should look like versus what it should look like. So you can see me actually working on the crown twice here because the second time, the one that's more yellow, is actually the accurate color. Keep your references close, kids. Moving back over to the hair, I'm using my watercolor pencils to define the sculpt a bit more so you can actually see the different lines. I want to make sure that I'm actually capturing those details as they are quite nice. Now she's looking pretty, if I do say so myself. Moving over to the crown and to the necklace, I want to make sure that I'm shinifying it. Yes, shinifying is a word. And I am going to add some pearlescent to her crown so it stands out a bit more as, well, pearlescent. But I do find that just adding the pearl to it is not good enough, so I actually add that into the paint color, and I feel like that does a better job of capturing that pearly finish. Last but not least, I do need to add some blush to her face. I want to make sure I don't overly saturate the face with color, so I'm dabbing it off on my tile here to make sure that it doesn't go too crazy and it looks really good. And next step, I do need to make sure that that crown is actually adhered to her head. The lines are there where it previously was, and I'm squeezing it up into the head and making sure it's a nice fit. Looks pretty darn good. Look at her with her crown and everything. No body, just floating there. I'm sorry. So as you can see, I want to add her body to her head, and I want her hand to actually holding her hair like she's flipping it back, not flipping her head off, but flipping her hair back. So adding the glue, I kind of know where I want to go, and I add the glue onto her hand as well, and get it all over my finger, so that lives there forever. Now I'm going back to the crown. It does turn out there is a bit of a gap there, so I'm just going to fill it in really gently. I don't need a lot. So here you can see that it looks pretty good. I do need to repaint it, and luckily, just so happened to have a marked container with the perfect color. Haha! Now I am moving this down here, and that was definitely on purpose. I wanted you to see these icons. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Don't forget that. Definitely the reason. And now we're going back up and continuing with this color, we're going to fill in all the hair areas that need painting. And it's looking really nice. Now moving on to the base, this is very similar to Cinderella. I want to make sure that I am including a base that kind of aligns with where she is in the story when she's wearing that dress. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there's many times in the story where she's wearing this dress, but this is, I think, the best one when Princess saved her and she's walking with him. So I'm going with the floor that they dance on. The edge is definitely not the right color, although brown wasn't the wrong color. The floor is kind of brownish, but I decided to go with this light purple to kind of tie the purple in her eyes back into the base. And it's the only other time that purple is included in the build, and I think it does pull it all together. It also kind of matches those lines. But now it's time to actually lock it all in, and Aurora, as I've been calling her Sleeping Beauty this whole time when I said I'd call her Aurora, Aurora is now on her base. Now using my new favorite finish, I'm using some Demco Matte Podge. It's not Mod Podge, but just Podge. And it works amazingly, and it actually does dry matte. And then I'm using Demco Gloss Podge on her eyes to make sure they have a nice shine. Simple little changes like this make a big difference to the final piece. Speaking of final pieces, she's done! Aurora is all done. third one in the series is all done and she's looking really great. I'm happy with the decisions I made in regards to the color of her dress and the color of her eyes. And I think overall she's a very stunning princess. I like her eye shape. I think it matches that reference that I had. And I think she kind of has a little bit more of a sassier look to her, which I think works with her character. And yeah, I'm pretty happy with overall just how it came together. But I really hope you enjoyed this and look forward to the next one in the series. Let me know who you think is going to be next. We are going chronologically. So like, comment, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment on who you think is next. And I'll see you in the next one. Thanks. Bye.